So here we go. Welcome to another edition of the Boot Room, and today I'm joined by good old Andrew Warren to discuss the big game this weekend. Packed out Portman Road, Town versus Pompey, second versus third. Andy, it's a pleasure as always to be joined by yourself. How you feeling for this one?
I'm excited about this one. These are 29,000 crowds at Portman Road. This is what Ipswich aspire to every single week. Big games against teams at the top of the table, games that really matter. If Ipswich get to where they want to go, which is obviously back to the Championship, games like this should be happening more and more often. This is what the club wants to aspire to. So to have one at this point of the season is really exciting, and just looking forward to seeing what Town can do in it.
Indeed, and let's talk about Pompey then. First of all, still unbeaten, third in League One. Didn't play on the weekend, just gone because of international call-ups. Bolton themselves. Danny Cowley in charge. A lot of talking points. We'll get into them in a second. But what sort of game are you expecting from a Pompey side? Of course, last year two different results: the goalless draw at Portman Road, and then the 4-0 thrashing at Fratton Park, which was a great evening. But how are you feeling going into this one?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. I think you always know elements of what you're going to get from a Danny Cowley team, which is a bit physical, a bit and robust. I think he spoke about about how pleased he was with how his team played out of possession at Portman Road last March, but was maybe a bit disappointed with how much he was able to test Ipswich on that day. And that was the right take from that game. I think Portsmouth were very, very solid, very strong. Ask you a lot of questions, but I don't think they quite managed to ask the right ones offensively of Ipswich. Ipswich couldn't score that day either, but I'd expect something largely similar. If I'm honest, Ipswich will want to control it and play as much as they can. Portsmouth will want to ask Ipswich plenty of questions throughout the game, and that's either going to produce an absolute cracker or or something a bit more tight. But either way, whichever one of those it is, I think it's going to be a really interesting game.
Indeed, and there's going to be some former Portsmouth players playing for Town this weekend. Of course, Connor Chaplin, Marcus Harness. Of course, Joe Pigott can't play for Pompey because of the loan rule and all that sort of stuff. But so many different talking points going into this game. Do you think Marcus Harness, Connor Chaplin could have an effect in the game at some point?
They have to for Ipswich. If Ipswich are to get the result that they want to get, they're going to need to get something from that area of the pitch. The two players behind the striker, you'd imagine it will be Chaplin and Harness. I'd be surprised if it wasn't. But if they are indeed given a go against their former club, they're going to have to produce something, because that's such a big area of the field for Town. Both of them will be up for it for slightly different reasons. Obviously, Harness only just left Portsmouth in the summer. Ipswich went in and took him from there. And Chaplin's a kind of youth system product of Portsmouth, loves Portsmouth, but for the afternoon, he's very much got an Ipswich head on. So hopefully that's an area of the pitch where Town can really get something from this weekend.
Definitely, definitely. Let's talk about your team then, Andy. It's not really much to change, to be honest. It's becoming a regular feature on the boot room where it's like, yeah, one little change here and there. Of course, Wes Burns moved back from international duty. Of course, didn't play for Wales, but we won't get into that. But crack on then, Andy. Your team.
You'd imagine Burns will come straight back in. It's probably not as much of a slam dunk there as it might have been in the past, but you'd imagine he would come back in on the right side, and if he does, I would say the vast majority of that side is starting to pick itself now, as you've just said. Christian Walton certainly will play. Danassian, Wolfenden, Leif Davis, Wes Burns if he gets straight back in. Morsey and Evans in the centre of midfield. We've talked about Chaplin and Harness, and then if it was me, it would be Freddie Ladapo going again through the middle of the pitch up front. I think he gives that control and focal point that Town need and will need in a game like this. But there is one area of discussion, and I'm sure many people are wondering if now is the game where you see Richard Keogh come into the side after a little bit of a wobble by high standards of Ipswich this season, a draw at Sheffield Wednesday, loss at Plymouth, both times losing leads. Is now the time to bring the experienced head, the Championship quality player Richard Keogh into the side? And you'd imagine if that was the case, George Edmondson's place might be under threat a little bit. But it's quite a nice luxury to have, isn't it? The option to to bring in somebody of Richard Keogh's class and experience. He's getting on in age, but he's shown in recent years that he can keep playing. And last year was a regular in the Championship. So that's an option Kieran McKenna's got, and I'll be really interested to see if it's one that he ultimately goes with.
Yeah, it's another leader on the pitch in front of a big crowd
Yeah.
because a lot of big expectations going to this game. Some fans maybe coming to their first game for a very long time because of the Pack Out PR campaign, the first of 3 this month. Andy, what's your prediction then, my friend?
Your
Oh, actually,
prediction.
before that, actually, as standard, key stats. Over to that. Okay, back. Sorry to interrupt you there, Andy. It's your time to shine. Your prediction, my friend. What are you going for?
I'd love Ipswich to win this game because we're obviously talking about this game coming up as the third of the 3 big ones against other members of the top 4. That they've taken a point from the 2 so far. 3 from this would be brilliant. But for me, my gut on this is saying a 1-1 draw in isolation, not a disaster. Certainly not. In the kind of slightly bigger picture of those 3 games, to come through all of them without a win would leave some questions unanswered. But there's a long time left in the season to answer them. I'm not entirely sure how helpful it is looking at all of these games in chunks like that. Right here, right now, I think a draw from this game would be okay, but they could answer an awful lot of questions and turn a bit of narrative around if they could go and get a win from it. But for me, it's a 1-1 draw. What are you saying?
On the same. Sorry to be boring. I've gone for a 1-1 draw as well. Though, can we, tick another box that we haven't been able to tick yet under Kieran McKenna, beating one of the big side, and just beating a team in front of a big crowd as well, because we haven't been able to do that. I'm looking at some of the stats. We haven't won in front of a big crowd for a very long time. And is that another thing you want to see as well? And if players that walk out that tunnel, we're a very different side to what we used to be when we played in front of big crowds and ticketed events. But it's just another box that needs to be ticked. Winning in front of a big crowd, big expectations.
Yeah. So it's obviously the club. I hope you want to be going in the direction of growing those crowds every single week. They're doing a really good job of that at the moment. They're going up and up and up. Obviously your mind goes back to the Sunderland game, which was this kind of equivalent of this one last season. Kieran McKenna in the stands that day. That was a 1-1 draw. Kieran McKenna's first game, I think, was a 26,000 crowd against Wickham, and they were able to edge their way through that one, which was great. But in general, no, the big occasions I haven't really seen Ipswich deliver. But like you say, I think this team is different. I don't think it's a team overawed at all by that. Obviously, you look through it, and there's players that have coped with those big crowds throughout their entire careers. This is different to the team that was kind of assembled from the League One All-Star team that we used to talk about, assembled under Paul Hurst and then under Paul Lambert going forward as well. This is a different Ipswich, I think, and I'd hope that the kind of the crowd factor can be a positive one rather than a hindrance. I certainly think it will be, but it'll be great to see Portman Road kind of bursting full this weekend.
And of course, they're going to get used to it anyway, because we are getting 20+ thousand every week at Portman Road, so they'll get used to the crowd anyway. But no, big game, Andy. Big game this weekend. Any other business? Any other notes before we wrap up?
I think Portsmouth are a good team. Obviously, we talk about Ipswich all the time, but there's some really good players in that Portsmouth team. We know all about Colby Bishop, don't we? From the Accrington days, Dane Scarlett has been keeping Joe Pigott out of the team, a proper nippy, good movement centre forward. So you've got kind of every test going there from the Portsmouth front two, a proper 4-4-2 from Danny Cowley. Marlon Pack in the middle of midfield is a player I really, really like. He can dictate things a little bit from there. So it should be a really good game between 2 really good teams. There are elements of Danny Cowley's football that you're going to get. They're not against roughing things a bit more physical, but they can play as well. I think there's a misconception that kind of some of his his football at Lincoln, which revolved around the really big striker Matt Reed. That isn't necessarily how they've played since. There's a bit more to it than that. But there's a mix of styles and maybe even a clash of styles too between Ipswich and Portsmouth. So all of those things chucked into the melting pot. It's going to be a game of intrigue and hopefully a game of real quality as well, and hopefully one that proves both you and I wrong and ends with Ipswich getting 3 points.
Indeed. Bring it on. Bring it on. I hope everyone enjoys the game. Of course, if you aren't going, follow Game of Us on the website and all the other bits and bobs that Andy and Stu do. Game day, Andy Stu and React and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, we'll see you next week in the boot room. Bye-bye for now.